Now then, how are you doing? Well, there are a couple of things I always recommend people do before embarking on a particularly important painting project. Now, one of them, of course, is to draw yourself a preliminary sketch in pencil. The other is to paint yourself what we call a tonal study. Now, painting a picture using a single colour is a great way to plan out your tonal values. It enables you to identify where your lightest tones are and where your darkest tones are. As far as a tonal study is concerned, tone is everything. It demands that you place contrasting tones in the right place. Light against dark, dark against light. If you don't, the paintings simply won't work. Without those contrasts, there will be no definition. Let's paint a tonal study.
Approaching a relatively complex scene such as this with a view to painting it can be daunting. To get any sort of handle on it at all means simplifying it, reducing it down to something a little more manageable. I'm going to paint this as a tonal study to help me identify in advance of a full painting where the lightest tones are and where the darkest tones are. First though, I need to draw it out. I'm using a 2B pencil and I'm keeping it simple. Notice the key word here, simple. All too often I see students piling on into a painting with all guns blazing, trying to put every single detail in as quickly as possible. The consequences of which is they lose control of it. This is going to be a tonal study, which means painting the whole thing in just one colour. The colour I've chosen is Payne's Grey. I'm not a huge fan of Payne's Grey, but it is perfect for this particular job. You could use any colour, of course. Sepia has always been a popular choice. I choose Payne's Grey because it has a nice, broad tonal range. I started by mixing up a medium strength Payne's Grey and applying it wet on dry to objects within the drawing. The two trees on the left was as good a place to start as any, followed by the shadows on the road and the grass verge. The most important part of this process is to break the composition up into a simplified version of itself, consisting initially of only lights and darks. This is where the value of the tonal study lies. It enables us to identify those areas of light and dark in a no-fuss, straightforward fashion. Working with only one colour can be liberating, but if the painting is going to work, it means total concentration. This is just a first wash, but even at this early stage, I need to be thinking about where my lightest tones are going to be, and making sure I leave them as untouched highlights. This is a one-pot painting. It's all Payne's Grey, so now I'm adding a little more paint to the mix to darken it slightly. Having established where my lightest tones are going to be, it's time to start looking at the mid-tones. I'm darkening the large tree to help differentiate it from the smaller tree just behind it. It's important at all times though to remember where the lightest tones are and try to retain them. I want the leaves to stand out against the dark of the trunk, so I've literally painted around them. The process is relatively straightforward then. I'm working my way through the painting, wielding my mid-tone, looking for objects that need to be darker than those next to them. When I paint in the shadows, I'm softening them off and blending them into their surroundings. Tone is everything. The painting's whole success, or otherwise, is entirely dependent upon the correct and careful positioning of contrasting tonal values. Two tones of equal or similar value placed alongside each other may weaken the overall composition. The same applies to a painting containing multiple colours. Working in monochrome, though, helps to focus our mind on the issue. In watercolour, whether we're working in one colour or many colours, we work from light to dark. Unsurprisingly then, I've added more Payne's grey to the mix to create a much darker tone. Now I'm looking for the darkest tones within the subject and painting them. It's as simple as that. Tone is relative, so the lighter I want something to appear, the darker and more intense the neighbouring tones need to be. In real life, our eyes are constantly making adjustments to aid our perception of the world around us. In watercolour, we occasionally have to engineer tones to make a painting work. Making dark objects even darker just to make them more prominent, or indeed to make the lighter objects right next to them more prominent. The value of the tonal study is that we're given the luxury of being able to manipulate the image to suit ourselves, all within the confines of working within a single colour.
Well, I hope that's given you some ideas, and remember, you can paint a tonal study anytime. It's quite a good exercise just to do every once in a while to keep your hand in, and it's an interesting and quite a fun challenge. I'll see you next time.